And then
You look very serious, TJ.
well, because I only do this 50 times a day, and I'm thinking, how do I start this? I'm sorry. It's really funny because I really do this a lot. Maybe, maybe this is the one where they automatically come in. Hold on. Stop video. I'm sorry.
You're fine. We're just happy that at least everybody pretty much uses Zoom now. Jody and I remember back when we had to go online, like right at pandemic for the consulting business. And it was crazy because people were like joining from their phones in the car, and people were trying to use, some of our clients use WebEx, and it was just this difficult journey of trying to get everybody online.
Okay. So everybody is coming in automatically.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh. This is so funny. Let me go ahead and introduce everybody. Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this month's Story of event, where we invite and highlight the stories of entrepreneurs and small business owners making their mark in Iowa. We want to remind you that as you create your own story, treat yourself to this time each month to rekindle your entrepreneurial spirit. My name is TJ Daniels, and I am the director of Iowa Center's Women's Business Center. The Iowa Center's WBC is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. You all will receive an email after this event from my colleague, Katie Hinches, thanking you for attending today's session, information on how to connect to our speaker, as well as a form to complete. Please do us a big favor and take some time to fill this form out. This information allows us to continue providing free educational programming for small business owners in Iowa. Now go ahead and take some time to locate the chat function on your Zoom screens so you can join the conversation by introducing yourself and your business, including any links, and ask questions or add comments. Oh, we already are getting I love AllSpice comments. So just to let you know, everybody loves AllSpice. It's not just me.
Fantastic. That's our retirement plan. So.
Today's story of guest interviewer is Jody Roan. Jody is a founding partner of Canary Consulting Group, a consulting firm that serves Central Iowa nonprofits. Jody has more than 20 years experience in strategic planning, operations process improvement, and building a healthy workplace culture. She uses this experience to help nonprofit leaders expand their impact and operate more efficiently. Jody enjoys coaching nonprofit leaders and boards, helping them define and communicate priorities to their teams, maintain focus, and work effectively together. Jody is a natural problem solver and encourager who loves making a difference in her community. And then today's story of guest, as we already know, is Rory Brown and Andy Hanning Brown. Rory Brown and Andy own and along with their team operate AllSpice Culinarium in Des Moines East Village. AllSpice was founded in 2010 by Alex and Jennifer Rhodes and was acquired by Rory and Andy in 2013. Prior to AllSpice, Rory worked in the telecom industry as a VoIP engineer. While he worked with technology, his heart was in the kitchen. He grew up cooking and has always enjoyed it. When the opportunity to join AllSpice presented itself, it made perfect sense. Andy's background is in technology, HR, and communications. In addition to AllSpice, he is a founding partner and consultant with Canary Consulting Group, an organization which provides strategic planning, organizational design, and other services to Iowa-based nonprofits. So now I will turn the screen over to Jody. And thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your story.
Thanks so much, TJ, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm so excited. As TJ pointed out, Andy and I are business partners on one of his business ventures, and then he is obviously co-owner of AllSpice with Rory. But I think one of the things that's really interesting about your story is the fact that you didn't necessarily set out to become entrepreneurs early on in your career. So can you tell us a little bit about what you did professionally before you ever moved into working with AllSpice?
So I worked primarily in telecom, mostly customer service. And then I got into like troubleshooting and more technology-based work there. And then when I left that business, I was doing VoIP engineering, which was kind of some new technology where we would interconnect with other telecom carriers over digital as opposed to like analog lines.
Great.
My background was also originally technology. We both sort of laugh because like VoIP is not new now. And for me, I was a COBOL developer, which nobody actually does anymore either. So you don't want to like call us for help with technology, even though we have technology backgrounds. Pretty early in my career, I moved into the HR space and have really spent most of my time there prior to joining Jody and launching Canary Consulting Group. And now we work primarily with nonprofits. This is kind of an interesting discussion for me because I'm surrounded by my bosses at both businesses right now. So it's like worlds collide.
So, that's an interesting entry point into the world of retail ownership, not necessarily a linear trajectory. And I think that's important for people to understand that, all of the things that you do before teaches you how to be a good problem solver and innovative and smart in how you approach things, but obviously landed in a whole new world. So Rory, you were involved with AllSpice first. Can you tell us about how you joined the business and in what context and the role that you played back then?
So when was that? 2011.
Yeah.
I was laid off from my job in telecom, which wasn't a big surprise. But then it happened that Andy worked with Jennifer at Principal, and she asked if I would be interested in working there as a seasonal employee to help them through the holidays and things like that. So that's how I ended up there. And then I had planned to stay on later. Alex had asked me to stay on and help with an expansion that they were working on at the time.
Yeah, but then moving into ownership, though, actually kind of arose from a huge tragedy. Could you tell the story of Alex and how you came to own the business and kind of what that process looked like?
So in March of 2012, Alex had a heart attack and passed away very unexpectedly. So during that time, Jennifer asked me if I would be interested in like co-managing the business for her while she just kind of figured out what she was going to do. So that's what I did. And then, it was interesting because when I would come to work, people would stick notes on the door saying, "Hey, do you want to sell the business?" And so in meetings, I would provide that information to her. And it was just a very interesting, like how people approached that situation.
It wasn't super compassionate.
No, it wasn't.
Sticky notes on the door. But those notes on the door did open the conversation for Rory to have with Jennifer about, if she does get to a point where she's interested in selling it, to talk with us about that, because we were interested in carrying on the legacy of the business, not just turning it in to something completely different than what Alex dreamt of.
Right. And then how long did Jennifer continue to own the business before you decided to purchase and she decided it was time for her to step aside?
She approached us in November of 2012 about buying the business, and then through all the SBA loan and all that process, it took until July of 2013 to actually close the deal. And I think it was June 21st, we ended up taking over the business.
You know, one of the things that I love is that I have the relationship with you that I can hear the real deal. And one time you described that purchase of the business as terrifying. Even though you knew everything about the business, you'd been operating it as a manager, you knew all the ins and outs. What was it like to actually go through the process of taking the leap financially and choosing to like move forward? What did that process look like for a purchase of an existing business? Because I'd imagine a lot of people who come into these conversations at the Iowa Center probably are telling about starting from scratch. So I think it'd be interesting for folks to hear about that.
Let me give you some context about part of what, there were some personal things that added to it being terrifying. So it just so happened that in the fall of 2012, we bought a house in Des Moines, and the market was a little different than it is right now. So we bought that house without having sold the house that we had in Ankeny. So we're dual homeowners with dual mortgages right at the time that Jennifer approached us and said, hey, do you want to buy the business? So we have been borrowing fools up to that point. And so I guess there's a point where you're just like, sure, pile it on. Why not? But it ended up working out. But I think you could talk through sort of how it's different to buy a business, and then how our experience was different because you worked there.
Right. I mean, I think that for us, it was a little easier in the fact that I knew what the business was like. I knew, like I had access to the books. I could see, that it was making money at the time. So it was a pretty easy, as far as decision wise, it was a pretty easy decision. But I think it's always kind of scary to like have a dream and, it's like, can I do this? It's a lot of money to borrow, right? And I think the bigger thing that's scary is like, can you it's your dream, it's tough because you don't want to fail. And I think for us, it was a little, I wanted to keep the legacy going too, right? Because I was also friends with Alex, not just an employee. So,
right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that made it a little bit easier, and Rory alluded to this. So when we needed to borrow money to buy the business, we worked through the SBA. And what was super nice at the time is that we had also developed a relationship with a small credit union that Jen and Alex used for the business when they owned it, because Rory was doing the deposits and everything for a period of time. So he was in there every week. So it was nice because they partnered with us really and helped us through that process with the SBA, and we're a backer of that. And so just, again, I think the important thing there is that relationships matter. That made it easier. The other thing that made it easier, in addition to knowing sort of the financials, was that Rory was ordering and doing that stuff. So all the supplier relationships, he had a chance to build all those. And that really did make the transition much, much easier than I think it would have been for somebody outside coming into a business. So if that had been the case, I think the first order of business for you would have been to build all those relationships that you already had.
Yep.
On paper, it probably sounds like you continued to do the exact same job, but I would imagine it actually felt pretty different. So what surprised you about the differences between operating the store and actually owning the business?
Some of the biggest surprises are just the sheer amount of people that stop in wanting to sell you something, or, we always joke about like somebody always wants a piece of the pie, right? And I think that's a big surprise. Like you think people really are genuinely want to help you, and you just have to be careful, when you're doing that. So that's one thing that I don't know.
I think watching you, a big change was how much time you got to spend face to face with customers on the store versus behind your laptop, ordering, doing the books, like all of that, all the not as fun stuff, parts of running the business were definitely more work than I think we would have guessed up front. I feel like you don't know until you really live it, right? Like how much work that stuff is.
Well, that sums up small business ownership.
Right.
Okay, so Andy, while Rory was diving in with the business, your career took an entirely different path, not directly related to the business in the same kind of capacity. So tell us a little bit about like what were you doing professionally during the years that you first acquired the business?
Yeah, so that change was mostly your fault, to be clear.
Yeah, I know. I'll take full credit.
So I had spent, I was at principal just shy of 18 years. So I spent a lot of years there in a number of different roles. And during my time there that overlapped with us owning the business, most of the things that I was working on, unfortunately, had their busy season at the same time as the store. So it became clear pretty quickly that like November and December were not going to be pleasant for us. And I carried around a little bit of guilt while working a lot of hours at my day job in not being able to help Rory. So I had an opportunity to make a change and went to a small HR outsourcing company here in Des Moines that ultimately ended up being acquired by a larger business. So I did that for a couple of years. And then Jody and I launched Canary Consulting Group together. And that's been sort of a godsend because it fixes the problem that we had in fourth quarter, because Jody and I are able to throttle our business so that I can help Rory during the craziest time of the year, because retail follows a pretty standard cycle. And I would say most retail, probably a third of their year, if not a little bit more, is done in November and December. Right. So it's like crazy time then. For us, I think it's also amped up because people are also entertaining and cooking more in addition to gift giving. So we sort of get hit with both of those things, right, which is great. It just requires a lot of man hour to get through and make it look like it's not a lot of work.
Now that I've seen that and been, front and center to watch you guys get through November and December, I have huge respect for anyone who is involved in a retail business during that time of year, for sure. So as you've had a little more flexibility and bandwidth, Andy, I think it'd be interesting to talk about how you've decided to kind of break down your day-to-day roles with the business, who does what, and how do you kind of divide and conquer for the work that needs to be done?
It's been pretty informal up until really this year. So a couple things have happened in the last year for us. So we talk about we're in the East Village. We're in the East Village, but we're in our production facility today in Rory's office here. And that's actually in the Valley Junction neighborhood in West Des Moines. And so now this last holiday season, we really worked through the ins and outs of logistics and having things multiple places, and that hadn't been the case before. So Rory can talk a little bit about his role, but really you are the primary operations person, product person, bookkeeping person, and I'm sort of HR and marketing. That's sort of our breakdown. Right. But I would say your work is, it's a 50-hour-a-week job pretty easily.
Yep, absolutely. So I think people probably are wondering then, you spend a lot of time on the business and then you go home and you're married. And so you're married to the business and you're married to each other in real life. So right. What's that like to work with your spouse? How do you balance it? Or do you how do you separate home and work?
Yeah, what's that like? I feel like I'm in my performance.
Yeah. No, we do a good job of balancing that. But I think with anybody that has a small business, you spend a lot of hours outside of work, still thinking about work. It's not, you're not done when you close for the day. You still have other things to do. We spend a lot of evenings running errands and things like that we don't necessarily get done during the day. But we work together really well, and that makes it easy. And we have the same vision for the business, which also makes it easy to get along and work and live together.
I'd echo what Rory said. I think, we sort of knew going in that we generally, unless it's a home improvement project, right, we generally work pretty well together. But I also think we have and acknowledge that we have really different strengths, right? And so I sort of fell into the communications and marketing, and I do our newsletter every week, those sorts of roles. And Rory's much better. He's the foodie of us. I'm the eater. He's the cooker. So he's the creative one that really figures out products and sourcing things. And he's also the mathier one of the two of us. So he's better at the bookwork and taxes and all of that stuff. So I feel like the division of duties played well to our different strengths as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of that just kind of figures itself out over time too.
But you do, I think one thing I'm not sure Rory even notices that I do, but when there's something in the evening, because you kind of asked about this, when there's something in the evening that I like that comes up that I want to talk about related to the business, I generally try to say, hey, this is a thing we need to talk about. Do you want to talk about that right now versus just launching into it? Because there are days where you don't want to talk about it right now, and that's okay. So just put it on the list. And you know, the great thing about work is it's still there the next day, right?
Absolutely. Very, very true. So speaking of family, beyond just the two of you, I feel like you've created a kind of a work team that sort of feels like a family. How many people do you have on staff? How big are you?
It bounces around a little bit between 8 and 12, I would say.
Right.
So right now, I think if you include us, there's 9 of us. But as we get closer to December, we'll have some seasonal help that will join. I think one thing that's cool is, you know, what are we coming up on the 11th or 12th year anniversary? 12th. And we still have one of our 9 is an OG. She helped open the business when Alex started it back at the beginning. She's still in high school, but she's still with us. So that's not, we're well aware that that's not super normal.
I think the other place where that it's, you guys are maybe a little bit different than normal. You know, what we hear in the news right now is that retail businesses, fast food establishments, plenty of other types of businesses as well are really struggling to recruit and retain staff. Tell us a little bit about your story, because I feel like it's a little different than what you might see on average. How do you find staff? What do you look for in a team member? How do you get them to stick around?
I mean, I would say, so one sort of weird thing, knowing we only have 9 people, we do offer full-time benefits to employees, which I think that makes a difference. We needed to figure that out. You know, we had a lot of retiree type employees that were covered there, but we also had a lot of younger employees that were getting to the point where they were aging out of their parents' plans and needed an option. And that was around the same time Jody and I launched our business as well, which meant I stopped getting great benefits from other places. So we had to get that figured out. And I think the timing was good for that because it's helped us with retention. I also think Rory is a super flexible, easy to work for boss, which makes a big difference too.
I don't like to micromanage.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we benefit from, right, is a niche business. So there are people who just like the vibe of the store and enjoy cooking that will reach out to see if we have anything coming up. And generally we've had, I mean, even now, we've probably got a list of 2 or 3 people out there that are interested in joining and doing some work when we have our next opening. So we've been really lucky and blessed right now in the market that we're in, because we get that that's not normal either. When we do need to source though, you know, there are some great culinary programs around town, and DMAC is one of those. And we do quite a bit with the Iowa Culinary Institute there. And I think we both recognize that, you know, if you have a young children, a family at home, going right out of that program to work at a restaurant might not be the option you want to take, because restaurants, like, we think we work hard, restaurant people work way harder. And so that's been helpful to some of our seasonal helps actually come from there, because they're interested in doing something for a while and trying out some different culinary adjacent things that don't require, you know, 70 hours a week until 1 a.m. in a restaurant. So a lot of good options.
Yeah, I think I can speak for just people who like to cook. Your store is a fun place to hang out. And so I can see where people would be excited about that. Rory, when you are interviewing someone for a role, what's the most important to you? What do you look for when you're evaluating whether somebody's a good fit for you?
I think typically somebody that is, you know, interested in cooking or has some experience with cooking. I like to get other people in the store that may have a different culinary experience. Like they may eat differently, right? Like one of our employees is a vegan. I have another employee that loves Korean food. So I like that they have different interests in cooking and how they cook. So those are things I look for. And then I want them to, to fit in, like they have to fit into the vibe really. And so those are the things I'm looking for. And just to have, some basic computer skills, things like that.
I think you can train on about everything beyond that, right? What you can't train on is fitting into the vibe.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think people stay once they're there? I mean, you've obviously had some really long tenured people. What do they say? Absolutely.
Well, I mean, it's I tell people this isn't brain surgery, right? No, nobody's gonna get hurt if they don't get, their product today or something like that. So, I think that they like it's pretty low key, not a lot of stress.
The other thing I would say about it too for retail, our hours are 10 to 6 Monday through Friday, 10 to 5 Saturday, and 12 to 4 Sunday. Also not normal for retail, right?
Yeah.
If you go to the mall, you're going to be there until 10 p.m. And not having to work nights on the weekends, I think is a big sales point too. The other thing I would say that will be more difficult to maintain as we grow, but that we do right now, is there's really no work that anybody on the team is asked to do that they don't also see from time to time Rory or I doing, right? So you talk about business ownership. Yeah, Rory is outsourcing new products and coming up with the next new best thing. He'll also clean the bathroom when it needs to be cleaned. I think the fact that everybody pitches in the work that needs to be done also just creates sort of a nice vibe for people that makes them want to stick around.
Yeah, people seem very genuinely happy to work there. And I think that creates just a special environment for us as shoppers as well. So let's talk about customers, because obviously you wouldn't be here doing the thing if it weren't for them, right? What kind of customers do you attract and how do you take care of them?
And you kind of hit on it. The taking care of them part, I think it's really important when Rory hires, and he hit on this earlier, that we look for people who cook differently than the people that we already have. That's probably our biggest risk. When you think about diversity in both your workforce and your client base, it is difficult to have that, especially when you layer in food, which is so tied to culture, right? And people's interests, that if you don't bring in a variety of people, it sort of is like we're all coaching on how to make meatloaf and burgers, right? Which isn't cool. We need a variety of people. And so I would say, as we've really focused on bringing people in that cook differently, we've started to see a shift in our client base, which I think is positive too. Pre-COVID, a lot of downtown workers, right? So we get really busy from about 4 to 6 and over lunch while people
during the
were
week
on their breaks. But I would say it's really gotten a lot more diverse since we added delivery during COVID and since people started cooking at home more.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rory, you've talked to me a little bit about how, I said, what's it like to sell in the store? And you said, for me, it's not so much about selling as education. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's very important because with food, people have different likes and dislikes. I don't like the same things, and I don't always. So I like to educate people, right? Or have a conversation with them and find out what they like and how interested they are in kind of breaking out of what they're like normally used to eating, because everybody gets in a food rut, right?
Yes.
Like they cook the same things, it's easy, it. So I think it's more about educating the customer and selling them something that they're going to use, right? And inspiring them to want to use it is important too. So, but it's not like, I don't want to sell something just for the sake of selling them something. I want them to be happy and I want them to return. And I think that's very important when you deal with it, really in any industry. You want to create that relationship and trust with them.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of brand loyalty then? Folks that'll buy just your products?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because when we were looking at houses, we would like go around, or when and we'd be like, oh, these people have our stuff in their house, right? So,
Clearly fantastic homeowners. They probably
No,
took
this
good
is
care of
good. Yeah,
this.
they've clearly taken care of this place. Fits our vibe. I think the thing I wouldn't minimize about those conversations too is we learn as well,
yeah.
right? So we don't cook all the things. And so when you have those conversations, you really learn about creative ways other people are using our products that then you're able to share and pass on.
Right.
And I think that that's really important. It's very relationship focused, but not in that annoying way. I think we've all gone in somewhere where like you cannot get the salesperson to buzz off so that you can actually have a conversation. So it's that fine line of being there and being helpful, but also not hovering and being annoying.
And customers also, inspire us to cook too. Like they talk about what they're cooking. I'm like, oh, I haven't really thought about that. Right. So I'll go home and look up a recipe and come up with something, as well. So that's the fun, like the really fun part about
Yeah. And then I know sometimes you're cooking something and then, Andy says, well, that's great. I'm going to feature it in the newsletter. And all of a sudden a customer's suggestion ends up out there and the whole community can be trying a dish. So that's a lot of fun.
I think the other cool thing, because I'm the eater, people bring us food, which is awesome. Like people will try.
Oh no, I'm not stepping up. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like there was a period last year where I think we had like
During
a
the
giant thing of
holidays.
brownies. I'm like, this is awesome. The best customers.
I think customers realize like during the holidays how crazy it is too. And so they'll bring us like snacks and things like that, or just something they want us to try.
We really have the best. We have the best customers. It's great.
So how many of your clients are local versus more geographically distributed? And has that changed over time? How do you spread the word outside of just a little East Village, Des Moines, Iowa?
Well, one of the things, like, because it's a walkable district, like, and stuff, we get a lot of people in town. We get a lot of people that come from, that from outside Des Moines that are coming to the capital, right? For when it's in session, things like that. So it's interesting because we get a lot of people that come in town for events or whatever, and they're like, we have to stop here. Like, this is our first stop, or things like that. So, but yes, Iowa's probably our biggest as far as sales wise, and then Minnesota and Illinois. Those are, the next biggest as far as like online and being able to track that information. So, and yeah, people come in the store and then, they start ordering online. During the pandemic, like that like our online exploded. We were sending everywhere in the US just because we had product and people were, we could get it out to them in a relatively fast time. So
that's awesome. And you've sold to all 50 states at this point, haven't you? Or really close?
Oh,
Yeah, the makeup shifted, Rory kind of highlighted this, but I would say too, we've invested a lot in our web presence, right? COVID, we had started that shift pre-COVID, so it was easy for us to pivot to online because we already had the website up and running and had spent some money on that. I would say once that was there foundationally, it sort of positioned us to be able to look at our marketing spend and do things that hit locations outside of Des Moines harder, because we had that website and all of our products available online to point people back to, which made a big difference too. So it shifted over time. I would say it's leveled out now. And I think, we'll continue to see growth in both markets, but probably more online just because, we have the whole nation at our fingertips, not just Des Moines.
Absolutely. I know you do genuinely love your customers, but I think you can't work in a retail environment without dealing with some negativity from time to time. And I know you've both shared that that's been a little bit of a learning curve. So can you just kind of walk us through how you manage to not take that home with you, or how do you manage those kinds of interactions that can end up being a little terse?
I will say we are very, very lucky in that I believe pretty strongly we have a small portion of those compared to other retail locations. And I think that goes back to the relationship aspect of the business, right? We've got enough people that we know and that return, that it's difficult once you've built that relationship, I think, to treat somebody kind of crappy. I think the hard part of it is like if I was giving somebody advice, the one thing I would say is do not let that monopolize too much of your time. Spend your time on the people who love you and your business and who are returning customers and are going to support you. Don't spend tons and tons of time on individual people that have a complaint, especially when it's sort of an unreasonable one. And I think, you know, that could be difficult to do, right? Because nobody likes to hear like that somebody's unhappy. But I think all of us have to recognize, we do this in our personal lives, right? When we pick friends and partners, you're not for everybody. And it's the same with the business. Your business just isn't going to be for everybody, right. And that's okay. And sometimes it's best, like I've acknowledged in a customer interaction before that we're probably not right for them, right? Because it was just clear they were not going to be happy. And I'm like, well, you know, go to the grocery store then. You can get similar things there, although I would argue they're not as high quality. But some people, you know, that's just a better option. I don't know. What would you say?
Well, I mean, we of course like discuss it at home like anybody else would, but yeah, you just can't. I think you kind of have to typically look at where they're coming from too. Like what has triggered whatever behavior it is. Like, are you truly unhappy with this, or is there something else that's like bothering you? And again, I feel like it's not personal, right? Like it's just, you know, I don't feel like they're unhappy with me personally. They're just unhappy with something at the store or whatever. But we try to make it right, you know, and be fair.
I would say we generally reply to all of them too. So if we get like a bad review or something, we make sure to ask more questions. What I will tell you is when you do that, they don't expect it and you never get a follow-up. Like I think maybe once we've had somebody come back with actual useful, actionable information, right? Yeah. Bottom line, don't let it take too much of your time.
Yeah, I think that's a good lesson for anybody else that is engaging in business ownership on their own. So let's take a minute to talk a little bit about what everybody gets super excited about. Andy, you just mentioned quality, but we want to hear about your products. And I think, you know, when the store first opened years and years ago, I was confused. Is this a local store? Where do they get their products from? How does that work? So share with us about that, if you could.
Well, yes, we are local. So we get our products from probably about 20 different vendors at this point.
Thanks, COVID.
I have expanded that a little bit. But yeah, the branding, I think, is what really throws people off. They think we're, you know, they come in and they're like, are you a chain? And I've had several people in marketing tell me you're branded so well that, you know, this is why people think that. The other interesting thing that I had somebody tell me is that our brand is, it's not gender specific. It's very like, it's not feminine or masculine. It's just very like simple. And
that branding is all like thanks to Connie Wilson.
Yes.
So Connie's a local graphic designer and she's amazing and really came up with that entire branding. Right. And we still use her today. She's another OG. She's been with us since the beginning.
Yeah, that cohesiveness, it just makes me happy when I can like see all my little AllSpice products lined up on my shelf. They all look good together.
And
what's your most
favorite?
Go ahead.
Oh, there is like, the funny thing is like, there is like a method to our madness. Like things are labeled specifically by color and category so that, you know, you can organize them. So which makes it really easy.
All the type A's say thank you, Rory.
I do think though, back to like, and you and I did this, Jody, when we started the consulting practice too, is I think early on before you need it, taking the time like develop your standards around your branding. So
Right.
what colors are you going to use? What fonts are you going to use? So that as you engage with other people, like we might like give money to an event or sponsor like a charitable event. We're able to give them the logo, say this is how our name should look. And these are the fonts that we use. We have those standards that we can give partners so that we show up consistently throughout the community. And I think if, you know, one tip I would give people is to do that earlier than you think you need to, because it sort of cements your place in the community and your brand. People start to recognize it.
Absolutely. So you do carry a few products that are not AllSpice branded. Tell us about those. How do you find those vendors? What do you look for?
Some of them show up, like our Worcestershire sauce. She just sent me a sample, and it was funny because when she sent it to me, it was like a big bottle of this. I'm like, nobody uses that much Worcestershire sauce, right? And I wasn't that interested, but then I tried it, and I was like, yeah, this is amazing stuff. So that's how we find some of them. Some of them just send me samples. Other things that we just look for. There's a website called Fair that does wholesale connectivity. Like it connects other wholesalers.
It's sort of like Etsy, but for
for wholesale. You have to have a tax ID and everything. So that's a good way. And just other relationships, like our hot sauces originally came from a friend of an employee, like her son made hot sauces. And then the other hot sauce came from somebody that just stopped in one day and said, hey, I'm making this hot sauce. Are you interested?
We try really hard for all of those. We call them internally other brands, so not AllSpice stuff. We try for those to have those come from either local businesses or other small business owners. We have a couple products that come from an organization that is female owned, and then they give money back to women who are starting businesses in other countries. So we like there to be a story there, because when you have the story, that generates interest. When there's not, you know, if we just carry another thing that everybody carries, it's not so interesting then. I will say there's always sort of this tug, like people will ask you, I think that there's a surprise to running the business. We were shocked how many people have an opinion on how you should run your business, and we'll share it. But where I was headed with that, a lot of times people will ask for things that are sort of outside of our core product mix. So also avoiding that temptation to become like a generalist versus a very specific spot, I think has been a challenge, but we're pretty like rigid on that. Like people will want other kitchen related things, and like we're 4 doors down from Kitchen Collage. Why would we do that? That doesn't make any sense. So
absolutely. What's your most popular product?
Our most popular product is the Amaza Swashera, which is to kill the mother-in-law spice.
And it is my favorite too.
We sell, that is our biggest selling product.
And that was a collaboration, right?
It was. That was a collaboration with Alessandra at Cooking with Alessandra. We had partnered to do some cooking classes. She's like, I want to do a cooking class around this. And I was like, okay, you know, and I'm like, well, just, you know, I need a recipe. And she's like, well, it's this, this, and this. And I'm like, no, I need a recipe. And then she brought me a paper copy of basically 3 items. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to be that great. So I ended up creating the recipe, and then just from looking it up and created it. She sells it at her location as well when she has classes.
Absolutely. And you've done other collaborations with local folks as well, haven't you?
Yep. We collaborate with Gusto Pizza. They have a seasoning that they put on their table. They came to us and asked us if we would be interested in packaging it so that they could sell it commercially. And then we also sell it commercially as well. Both of those products, both of those products are in our Des Moines gift box that is just all local stuff that, you know, are unique to our store in Des Moines.
That's great. So what does research and development look like for you guys? What's that process like?
A lot of eating.
Yeah, exactly.
Trial and error.
I personally remember when Rory was working on the Rory Brown sausage seasoning, it was like being at the eye doctor, because he'd have like, I'd wake up, I generally wake up a little later than him. He's down in the kitchen and it smells like breakfast, right? And I go down there and there's literally like 8 plates with sausage on them. And he's like, well, which is better, 1 or 2, 1 or 3, 3 or 2? And after a while, I'm like, they all taste the same. I don't know. But a lot of times it is literally that, like trying it and tweaking it. And then sometimes too, if it's something like we recently released a shawarma seasoning, like we actually went places and had shawarma to figure out like what the differences are, so that we would sort of know how we wanted to make it. Rory has a really unique skill, I think, because I don't have it, so it must be unique, where he can eat something and sort of tell you, oh, that has thyme, and like he can break it down and deconstruct it. That I cannot do that. I'm like, it's good. But going out and trying different foods is helpful because he's able to then tell what he wants to include.
So that's how you're personally supporting the culinary scene in Des Moines.
That's right. Yeah. For owning a spice shop, I'll tell you, we eat out plenty. So we support the local scene.
You know, I feel like no one can talk through a business owner's journey without touching very briefly on the pandemic and how that went for you. I know by now we're probably kind of tired of talking about it, but I did want to point out that you guys did something a little bit different than most businesses, in that you had a pandemic plan before the pandemic was actually in America. So let's hear a little bit about that. What did that process look like for you, and how did it help you navigate that changing water?
I'll let Andy talk about it, because he's really the one that developed the plan. And
I don't even know why I did it. I think you remember, Jody, because we read the news like in December, and I was like, this is gonna be it. Like something is telling me this is gonna be a thing. And I've done some business continuity planning for teams that I was on at different larger companies than I was at. So I'm like, the beauty of having a plan is that it takes the emotion out of the decision. So we sat down and said, all right, when this happens, here's what we're gonna do. So it was stuff like, when a case is identified in the US or community spreads identified, we're gonna like start paying close attention to these things. When there's cases in Iowa, we're gonna remove all our samples and stop sampling. And we had a pretty rigorous list put together. And at first, I think the team, maybe you included, thought I was nuts. But later, as stuff would
got made fun of a lot.
I did. But when stuff started happening, we're like, well, what's the plan say? Because it did take the emotion out of trying to figure out what to do. And I would say, we networked a lot with other small business owners, especially in the East Village, and watched people really agonize over, should we require masks now? What do we, and we were pretty like, this is what we do, and we follow CDC guidance. Because the minute you veer away from those things, you're making decisions based on how somebody feels, not what's really going on. And I think that helped us a ton. What I didn't anticipate is how little guidance there would be and how difficult it was to get out of pandemic operations back to something more normal. And that, I would say, is we're still doing that, and it's been a lot more challenging. We fared better than some of our peers for a couple of reasons. I think one was having the plan. 2 is that we're big enough to have a web presence and have that infrastructure there, but not so big that we had a lot of like logistical problems. And a lot of our larger competitors really struggled to get product out during the pandemic. Rory sort of alluded to that earlier, and we were still turning things around same day, which was a big deal for us and I think helped a lot. We did close for in-store shopping for 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
It was longer than that.
Was it longer?
It was like a month.
But continued curbside. So all you had to do is order online. You could walk up to the door, we'd hand it to you, and off you went. And we stayed as busy then. The other thing that helped us, I think, is just the business we were in. It was a little bit of luck. People had to cook at home and wanted it to be better, right? And so they were shopping for that type of thing, and stores were running out of what we had. So those things all helped us.
Yeah. And then, we were 4 people working in the store, and it was a blessing. I got to go to work every day, which was great. But we kind of had an agreement, like we were gonna, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna be safe. We're gonna, and so it really worked out well. We just converted everything to basically inside the store to order fulfillment, right? So our day looked very different, but it was, I had great staff and they helped us get through it.
I'd say we've carried some of that planning forward though. Like we have, we require internet connectivity to process payments. Yeah. And we have like backup plans now. So if we lose internet, we have a plan for how to deal with that. So it's still that level of planning for things that are most likely to go wrong has sort of spilled over to other spots. And I would say we have better systems in place as a result of dealing with COVID than we did going into it.
Mm-hmm. And Rory, I'm sure there's still remaining effect in terms of like supply chain disruptions and getting a hold of product. How are you contending with that right now?
Well, sometimes it just depends. Most of my suppliers are really good about having ETAs on when we were going to be able to get stuff or things like that. Sometimes I just wait it out. Other times I have to go to somebody else and be like, hey, can I, get this here? And so, sometimes when I have to go somewhere else, it ends up being a little more expensive. And so we just, make the best of it and go forward. There's not a lot you can do, but
we buy more in advance.
We do
now
buy more in
too.
advance.
So part of moving out here to the warehouse and production location, expanded our storage footprint from probably a few hundred square feet to a few thousand. And so we're able now to buy, like Rory tends to buy like enough glass to get us through a year, basically. And that I think helped smooth out some of the spots that would have been really bumpy for us and were for some of our peers.
Right.
Yeah, because I'm sure a thing that many people did not know about AllSpice before you moved into your production center was that every single bit of that packaging for every product that you saw on your shelves was happening in the back room at the store in the East Village location. Right. Yeah. So what's it mean to you, and have you benefited from being able to move to having a separate place where you're doing all of your packaging, and what's been the pros and cons of that, and how have you walked through that?
How much less do you run between places?
Well, before we had this space, I had 2 storage units and another storage facility. None of them were that big to begin with. So I would have to take smaller shipments of packaging and things like that. But on top of that, I had to run around to all of those places and take it to the store to be packaged. Now everything is here in this location. And they do all the packaging here. So there's a lot less running that goes on. And I think that in general, the space is conducive to having more product on hand. So that has been a huge benefit. And there's just a lot less interruptions here during the day. I will say probably one of the biggest downsides is that a lot of customers were so used to just stopping in and being like, oh, I need a pound of this, or I need 8 ounces of that. And it's not there anymore. So they either need to call ahead and we'll get it there, or in some cases we've had them come out here, like they'll pay for it and then they'll come out here and pick it up. But we've also worked really hard on identifying those things and having them available at the store, so that if people do just pop in, we can fulfill their orders for them.
You bet. What's it been like for your staff to be between 2 different locations now? Because prior to that, you're all in one spot.
Right. Well, the downtown store is like 1,650 square feet. And we would, I think during the height of Christmas, there would be 5 employees in there. And if you think about that, and
way more stuff.
Way more stuff, and all the customers. It's just, the nice thing is we're not like on top of each other working. And down there, when it was lunchtime, everything had to stop. We'd have lunch then. So it's just way more efficient now. We can, it's just a lot easier to stay on top of production and give box production and stuff like that.
They stay in touch.
And
though.
they
I
do
mean, we
stay
have
in touch. Yeah.
There's a bat phone between the two locations.
There you go.
They can call each other and stay in touch.
Fantastic. So how is the production center and everything else you're doing kind of positioning you for growth? What's the future look like for you guys?
Well, we couldn't grow when it was all done in the store. I mean,
Right.
we were really like tied to that location. So I think this was sort of the first step in being able to support multiple locations at
Right.
some point, right? Was having it all here in one spot. What else would you say?
I mean, it's just, yeah, once I think our goal is once we get this ironed out and how everything will work between the store and here, that we would open other locations in the metro area.
Mm-hmm. We don't ever want to be like Lowe's, right? We don't want to be the food version of a home improvement giant. We want to stay boutique,
Right.
And definitely in the Des Moines area.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we're coming close on time, but I think other business owners who might be listening in today probably would love to hear what you've learned along the way in terms of your own personal journey, and would just love to share with other small business owners as they kind of try to grow their own personal dream.
I don't know. For me, I've learned about both of us that we can do a whole lot of things we didn't think we could do. I think
True.
you learn that pretty darn fast. And I think you also learn that nobody really knows what they're doing until they have to, like, I think a lot of people get in situations where
Right.
like you just have to figure it out, right? There's nobody writing the playbook for you. You're writing it as you go.
Yeah. And I think that like the thing I've learned is there's things that I've put off and put off and put off. That it's like, I don't want to do that. And I realized that there's, you know, I worked it up way more in my head than it was. Like, I've been on TV a couple times, and I would tell you, like, I don't really enjoy that kind of attention. But it was like, once I did, I was like, I don't know why I was so upset or like why I was so anxious about this, you know. And it's the same with other things. Being direct with people is not something I'm really great at. But I have learned, like, sometimes you just have to tell people no. And that has gotten easier for me.
I think too, one of the things about working together, whether it's your spouse or another partner, I think it can become really easy to focus on the things that are a nag, like that drive you nuts about the other person. But what I'll tell you, I don't know how you feel, but I look at the business as a whole and where it was when we started and where it is now, and what the sense that I have more than any other feeling is an overwhelming sense of pride at what you were able to build and create so far, right? Like, you just look at where we started not knowing anything about running a business to where it is now. And to me, it gets really easy to get hung up on the day-to-day,
Right.
but like, it's really cool when you look back at what you've accomplished.
And I think you don't, like, I would say I don't really see like much change because I'm in it every day.
Sure.
And sometimes you just have to like just sit down and talk with people, especially like people that used to work here or something, and you talk about how things have changed. You're like, wow, it has changed a lot. Because you know, when you're in it every day, you don't always see the big changes.
What's your favorite part about owning AllSpice?
I like just being there.
Yeah.
I like interacting with customers. I love being down at the shop. And I think that honestly is also probably one of the harder parts about running it, is you have all the other work to do and it drags you away from being able to do that part that's so much fun. And I think yours is probably similar, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I love working with customers and helping people. That's like, if I could just be in the store every day and helping customers, that would be the best part. But that's not something.
Work call, duty calls.
Duty calls.
I see TJ.
Yes, we're coming to closing time. Unfortunately, this has been so interesting. I love Andy's new terms, mathier. Yeah, I wrote some of those down so I could include those in some of our small business essentials coming up. Um, if anybody would like to know more, see some of the items that are for sale at AllSpice or the newsletter, I know somebody asked about that. It's allspiceonline.com. They are located in the East Village, so you could go check them out. I thank you all for attending today. On May 24th, we have a small business essential at noon. It is going to be on retention. So if you want to go to our website, the iowacenteronline.org, you could check that out. But with that, we'll end this session today. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
Thank
us,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.